Imagine, long ago, a tribe gathered round the flickering fire, telling stories of gods and monsters, of rebellion and consequence, of present meaning and future destiny. And now jump forward to the present, to faces wrapped in the light of a screen.
Hello. So one of the things I really love to do is to create space for good conversations, for using stories as a bridge to go deeper and talk about life's big questions. I'm particularly drawn to the mythic and to science fiction and fantasy. And it seems to me that with science fiction, you've got the mythology of a modern scientific age. So it might seem like it's something quite different, but actually it's often continuing the same discussions, the same questions, just in a slightly different key. So I've got this talk about science fiction as modern myth making, which I gave at Hutchmeet UK, and I hope you really enjoy it. This is about finding good ways to have real conversations and ones where I listen and learn as well, but through that to dig into something deeper. So enjoy the talk and let me know what you think in the comments, or drop me an email.
Great. So let me begin. My name is Caleb Woodbridge, and I'm a writer, editor, and I guess you could call me a cultural apologist. I like communicating through culture about Jesus, about the Christian worldview, way of seeing things, and I'm a science fiction fan. And whether you're a fan yourself or just curious to find out what others of us see in the genre, I would say that it is a key stream in our culture across all of these media. And so welcome. And I'm going to take you on a tour to show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Matrix reference. So in a whistle-stop tour of science fiction as a genre, but also talking about my experience as a fan and how my faith and my fandom have related, and sort of both of them informed each other. So my fandom has impacted my journey of faith, and my faith as a Christian has obviously shaped my engagement with fandom. And I'd like to give a nod to Ted Turnow, who is here at this conference, who's researching fandom and spirituality. And his survey questions that I filled out spurred some of the reflection that has gone into this talk. I'd also like to give a nod to Damien Walter, a YouTuber, not a Christian, but who has thought really thoughtfully about science fiction as myth. And so do check out his channel. So some of his ideas have informed my thinking, though I'm taking them in a somewhat different direction. And what I would say about science fiction is that this is not just about entertainment or escapism. Not that there's anything wrong with those things, those have wonderful value, but science fiction and its fandoms can be a bit of a bellwether for the wider direction of culture. You might remember how some of the Gamergate stuff and stuff with the Hugo Awards kind of was a bit of a warning sign on the dashboard for where things were going with some of the culture wars. And I think science fiction gives us a uniquely powerful lens on our culture's search for meaning and how we think about the future, how we think about our present experience, especially as our world is changing so quickly, and it feels like science fiction can't keep up with all of the things that are being developed, especially for something like Black Mirror, which is very near future, and suddenly with AI, stuff that was a dystopian parable 10 years ago is this year's app update. So this isn't just about science fiction as a genre, but also about the future of Western culture and civilization in the 21st century. So welcome. We've already covered a bit of this. I've heard Star Wars, Star Trek, Ray Bradbury was mentioned. I'm a massive Doctor Who fan. Oh, I forgot my scarf. I brought my Doctor Who scarf especially but it is back in my room. So I am. I'll just no, I didn't put it there. I do have the extraordinarily long Tom Baker scarf. Bow ties are cool, but don't go with this shirt. Um, yeah. So there's all sorts of fascinating authors back to Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, one of the really early examples of the genre. There's all sorts of things across different media. Comics, that's another one that's massive. Any comics fans here? Yeah, great. So things like, I don't know, Brian K. Vaughan's Saga series, there's games, Mass Effect, Bioshock, Cyberpunk 2077. Any other favourites anyone wants to shout out? Oh, yes. Oh, I think Thunderbirds might be the first thing I was a proper fan of. Like when I was 6, 7, 8, that was my birthday party. I was getting the magazine. I was making the Blue Peter paper mache Tracy Island. So yeah, wonderful stuff. Um, oh yes, yeah. I've not read those. I've heard him talk about them at a sci-fi convention. But yeah, Halo, yes, yeah.
File.
X-Files, oh yeah, another very good Terry Pratchett. Yes, yeah. Um, and in terms of fandom and fan culture, have you ever taken part in online fan discussions? Anyone put their hands up to that? Have you been to an in-person fan club or meet up? Have you cosplayed or dressed up as a science fiction character? Been to a convention? Written fan fiction? I've actually had officially published Doctor Who short stories with Big Finish. I'll get onto that later. So creative fan art. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways. So whether or not you've done these yourselves, I think I don't want to gatekeep. By the way, I think if you just enjoy the stuff, you don't have to do any of these to be a fan, a true fan. But I would put my hands up to all of these. And other than church, I'd say that science fiction fandom has been the most formative community that I've been part of, particularly Doctor Who fandom. So here I am back in 2005, pre-beard, looking very happy to be outside the TARDIS, very happy that Doctor Who had come back to television. I came to it in the sort of wilderness years where it wasn't on there, but engaging with the repeats and the books and comics and audio dramas. And that's my native fandom, and which I've been part of for over 25 years. In fact, I would date my membership to the Church of the TARDIS back to my 14th birthday in 1999, where my chosen birthday treat the November of that year was to go to the Llangollen Doctor Who exhibition, where they had various props and TARDIS set and Daleks and so on. And it also coincided with a BBC Two Doctor Who night with all sorts of behind-the-scenes documentaries and the start of a new repeat season. It was also around that time that I got into the online forums, started connecting with other fans online, started buying Doctor Who magazine regularly and reading it from cover to cover. And just to give some context, I was a really awkward, nerdy kid, always with my nose in the book and rather cripplingly shy. And this was the time when geek culture wasn't yet so mainstream as it is now. Might be hard to remember now or to think about, given how much things like Lord of the Rings and Marvel sort of came completely mainstream as part of the culture. But before Doctor Who came back, before it was cool with David Tennant, before Marvel took over the box office, it really did come with a bit of a stigma to be into science fiction, especially growing up in a small North Wales town. And I felt sort of doubly isolated as as a nerd, but also as a Christian. Um, and looking back, I can see that probably neurodivergence was part of the mix too, but I had no concept of that at the time. And one of the things I really struggled with was connecting with others and to make those friendships and connections. I think particularly had this sense of, oh, we as Christians, we're this tiny minority, we're sort of persecuted in society, and really felt a little bit in a sort of a holy huddle here. But science fiction was the thing that gave me a bridge to connect with other people. Through my love of stories like Doctor Who, I was able to find friendship with a small band of other nerdy kids across the different years in school who enjoyed the fantastical, to begin finding community and connection online. And it gave me motivation and confidence to make some friends beyond church and to begin engaging with culture more widely. So that's just a bit about the personal significance. I'll have a bit more about my story as we go along. But why does science fiction resonate so powerfully for many? And why has it become so much a mainstream part of popular culture in the last few decades? I want you to take a moment to imagine long ago, a tribe gathered round the flickering fire, telling stories of gods and monsters, of rebellion and consequence, of present meaning and future destiny. And now jump cut, like from the bone in 2001, A Space Odyssey, being thrown in the air to the spaceship thousands of years later, jump forward to the present, to faces wrapped in the light of a screen, as starships soar while heroes and villains battle. And I would say that it's different symbols, but the same quest for meaning, the same drive to make sense of the world and to ask the big questions. And as online critic Damien Walter argues, science fiction is nothing less than modern myth making. It's the mythology of a scientific age. Do check out his science fiction YouTube channel. But our quest for stories big enough to give us meaning in an age that believes that science is the best, maybe even the only way to know truth. Our stories have been transposed into a scientific key. And this is what happens when a culture's stories are transformed by rejecting myths in the name of science. We don't actually leave myth behind. We just end up with a mythology that borrows the prestige of science to lend plausibility to it. So what are some of the big themes in science fiction? And one of them is this power of science and reason, the myth of progress. And science fiction often reveals our longing for a technological and scientific hope, an optimism where, through the light of science, human reason and ingenuity, we can solve our problems and reach for the stars. And I think classic Star Trek is an excellent example of this. By the 23rd century, humanity has overcome war and poverty and joined the peaceful United Federation of Planets and is exploring the universe at warp speed. And that's a really powerful myth, and that still fuels real life ambition. It's stories like this that help inspire people to careers as astronauts and to work for NASA, to the dreams of Elon Musk to colonize Mars. And the same ethos continues in novels and movies like The Martian. Is very much a let's save this guy with the power of science. Just let the scientists cook and look what they can do. Project Hail Mary also emphasizes this a lot, but it's interesting because I think it does shift towards the end in terms of you begin to see that maybe science alone isn't enough, but sacrifice is needed too. I won't go into spoilers there, but just there's an interesting twist on the lone guy solving everything by science sort of uh, template that the Martian set. Now, the problem with this is, as a mythos, is that I think it fails to deal with the darker side of human nature. There's an underdeveloped sense of sin. And also, it fails to recognize the hard physical constraints that mean that very probably, and that you can come at me in the Q&A if you disagree, human life is inextricably tied up with planet Earth. There seems to be nowhere else in the universe we can thrive. And this dream of galactic exploration is escapism for avoiding facing our responsibilities at home. The idea of humans going by starship to other solar systems, other galaxies, is as much a fantasy as the magic carpet. It's just got it's better dressed up. And as Christians, there's much we can affirm in terms of the optimistic view of human potential. We're made in the image of God, and we've got such tremendous potential. It's wonderful the things that we can do, even in our fallen condition. But there's another side to it. And to be fair, that is often what science fiction explores on the more dystopian side. And there's stories like Blade Runner, like Brave New World, like C.S. Lewis's That Hideous Strength, which explore how things can go wrong. And one of the questions that's very often at stake is, what does it mean to be human, and the ways in which we can be dehumanized. And there's post-apocalyptic stories such as Stephen King's The Stand, Mad Max series of films, Fallout, games and TV series. And they explore how by accident or human folly, the civilization we have built might come falling down, and what might come after. And it's often projecting our fears. Maybe climate change is something that looms very large in the imagination at the moment, whether that's explored literally or metaphorically, as in Game of Thrones, where you've got winter is coming and this inevitable tide of disaster that everyone's bickering and not facing up to. And there's expressing the widespread fear and sense of despair that many in our culture feel. And often the view of being human is quite pessimistic. There's this idea in a lot of the post-apocalyptic stuff, not all by any means. There's more optimistic stuff like Emily Sedgen's Station 11 is a really great example of more humanistic post-apocalyptic storytelling. But very often it's the sort of it is the Mad Max, nature red in tooth and claw, the people with the spiky the skulls on their motorcycles, that kind of thing. And so it's perhaps going to the other extreme, and there's this tension then within science fiction as a genre between the optimistic utopian projection of our hopes and the dystopian and the projection of all our fears. Another recurring theme is power and responsibility. With great power comes, yeah. And with superheroes, I mean, you can argue about the precise boundaries of science fiction and fantasy and where superheroes fit into them. Just as a quick straw poll, would you, who here would class Marvel as science fiction? Yes? No? Not sure. Yeah, mostly you would. I would, because although Arthur C. Clarke famously observed that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, I'd say the reverse is also true. Any sufficiently advanced magic or magic system is indistinguishable from technology. And you can sort of see that particularly in things like the elaborate rules-based fantasy of, say, Brandon Sanderson, who writes kind of some stuff that's more explicitly science fiction, some stuff that's fantasy, but is very logical and left-brained in its approach, whichever genre he's notionally writing in. And Marvel mixes genres, so you've got Thor and Doctor Strange rubbing shoulders with like Tony Stark's Iron Man, the clash of the mythical and the technological, all coming together to save the world from alien forces. But the reason I'd sort of put it in the science fiction bracket is that it at least tries to generally ground things in something vaguely scientific sounding. So the powers usually come from an X gene or being bitten by a radioactive spider, given super serum, the power of a yellow sun, exposed to cosmic rays. You get the idea. It's sounding sciencey, and there's hard sci-fi that is more rigorously that, but there's a lot of soft sci-fi that, but it is still borrowing the prestige of science to go, oh yeah, this could really happen on some level, and that adds to its appeal in our scientifically minded age. And following on from power and responsibility, I think we see this idea of messiahs and heroes, and there's also often um, a critique of that. And I think with that, that's often something we see in the sort of postmodern turn in science fiction, as we move away from the sort of grand narratives of progress and the sort of simple heroes' journeys. We get into a suspicion of meta narratives, a suspicion of big stories of unambiguous heroes. So Dune, for example, Paul Atreides, he avenges his father. He becomes the Galactic Emperor. Sorry, spoilers, but he it's also very much shown that the prophecies about him as the Liz and Al Gaib were planted by a secret society as part of a long game of social manipulation, and he becomes a tyrant who spreads war across the galaxy. So it's playing with these tropes, but then using them to warn against charismatic leaders and ideologies. The Matrix too is another example of how of a sort of postmodern take on the genre, where we're invited to see through the socially constructed nature of reality, to see through the matrix, the world pulled over your eyes. Realize that everything is a simulation and you can step outside it and rewrite your reality. And many people, for example, have particularly read this in light of the Wachowskis having transitioned as trans people, as an allegory for the trans experience, and sort of seeing through the gender binary as one of these supposed realities that you sort of see through and step outside the matrix of being confined by these binary ways of looking at the world. Doctor Who. I've been very restrained. I've taken a long time to get here. And Doctor Who has also interrogated this idea of the Doctor as a messianic hero. And some of the David Tennant episodes in particular sort of leaned into playing with Christian imagery, often in quite subversive ways, sort of evil heavenly hosts, the Doctor as the Messiah, sort of receiving the prayers of humanity that rejuvenate him, and he goes, "I forgive you," to the Master, but notes that it isn't the Doctor's power that is invoked by prayer, but the telepathic effect of human belief being channeled into him is the thing that restores him. So it's playing with these Christian tropes, but it's then putting a humanistic twist on them. But this tension running through the show between the Doctor as this Messiah-like figure, and then sort of showing his fallibility as a madman in a box. It in turn celebrates the Doctor, deconstructs his Messiah-like status, but then asks what it means for the Doctor to be a good man. And so it rebuilds a sense of heroism, even if it's a more chastened one than the sort of messianic tropes that perhaps we started off with. And this kind of back and forth, this oscillation, is characteristic of metamodernism, which is, you might have heard of this, you might not, but many people now are saying this is what's following on from the postmodern outlook, is more of a sense of, okay, if postmodernism wanted to tear down and critique all of the stories and ideologies, seeing them as oppressive, metamodernism sees those questions, accepts those questions, um, but says that okay, yeah, there are these problems. We need a story to live by. We need to find something. So there's a kind of informed naivety, a new sincerity that comes. As Matt Smith's Doctor says to Amelia Pond in one of the series finales, we're all stories in the end. Just make it a good one, eh? Some more examples of stories that are leaning into this question of where do we find meaning? And The Last Jedi, very controversial. Who here thinks The Last Jedi is a good film? Who here thinks it sort of has some problems?
There, right.
Yeah. You think it completely ruined Star Wars and needs to be struck from the canon forever? Okay. Yeah. So it's and part of that is because it takes quite a deconstructive approach to Luke Skywalker. It shows him as someone who is disillusioned, who's walked away, and by the end, he does stride in with a lightsaber, wave it around and face down the whole army. And so there's a sort of this deconstruction and reconstruction pattern, but the way it's done left many people feeling a bitter taste in their mouth, and I can understand and sympathise with that. But it became a real flashpoint in the culture wars, a sort of barometer of a larger cultural divide between people wanting to hold on to or recover some of the more traditional heroic values, and those who have a more deconstructive tendency, who want to sort of see things taken apart a bit. Okay. And who here's seen Everything Everywhere All at Once? Do you know, heard about this one? More people heard about it. So this is a multiverse story about someone who seems really ordinary, but she finds out that she's the one who can save the multiverse from this destructive force that is tearing everything apart. And it explicitly puts the question of whether there is meaning to life front and center. And there's this whole question of, is life meaningless? And it makes the case by the end that, as one of the characters says, that choosing to live life as if life is meaningful is strategic and necessary. It's a kind of, it's sort of on the cusp between postmodernism and metamodernism, I think. It's sort of got that very much questioning all the narratives, but then it's making that move of actually we need a story to live by. We need to commit to these values, even if there's not necessarily a firm foundation to build them on. And I think the Spider-Verse movies are very meta and self-aware in a way that sort of fits into this trend. They're playing with the mythos of Spider-Man, but they're also telling a sincere story about Miles' heroic journey as a Spider-Man. So there's this hunger for meaning, but it's fragile and fragmentary, and it's not quite sure whether we've got anything firm to build it on. In fact, suspicious of any overly confident assertions of truth or meaning. So yeah, and this is something that people have picked up on, and Damien Walter, he argues that we need a new mythos, and that he hopes that science fiction can provide that. And there's this post-Christian quest for meaning, this meaning crisis, as we deal with these things, and people are looking in all sorts of places. And so I think there are both challenges there, but also opportunities for us as Christians. I'll get onto that. Let's shift from the stories themselves and more into the fandom experience. And if science fiction is sort of an alternative form of mythology, then I'd say that science fiction fandom is, or can become at least, a form of alternative religion. In 2013, it was this 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, and I attended the Doctor Who prom in the Royal Albert Hall, and fans came from far and wide. And there were appearances from Matt Smith as the Doctor then, and Jenna Louise Coleman, and there were vampires, and there were Cybermen stamping down the steps, prowling and stomping among the audience, Daleks coming up from the stage, and the Doctor's most heroic moments projected up on the screen. Let me see if I can find the clip. Just a moment. It's not quite ready to go. Yeah. So you have this soaring music, the orchestral themes, Murray Gold's score, the Doctor at his most heroic. And as I looked around at the rapt faces, I couldn't help but think, this is worship, or something very close to it. And I'll just say a bit about my adventures in fandom. Here's me sneakily trying on a Time Lord headdress at the Doctor Who celebration. I wasn't supposed to do that, but don't tell the BBC. So yeah, let's talk a bit about how this has affected me. I've already talked about how I started to engage with fandom. And to begin with, I went in with quite a combative attitude as a Christian. On these forums, there were different sections, and you could discuss the TV show, you could discuss the comics and audios and all of these things. But there was also an off-topic section where you could talk about religion and politics and uncontroversial things like that. And I was a bit of a keyboard warrior. It's like, this is my opportunity to convert the unbelievers with the force of my arguments. And so, armed with a Thompson Chain Reference Bible, Wayne Grudem's systematic theology, and Josh McDowell's evidence that demanded a verdict, I set about typing furiously. And this was in the age of dial-up, so I'd connect, sort of see the latest response, save it, go offline, write up my response, reconnect to post my ast response to those debates. And that was actually helpful for testing and refining my beliefs in some ways. And what sort of softened it was that it was in the context of a community that I was otherwise engaged with as well. Because these were people I was also saying, who's your favourite Doctor? Daleks versus Cybermen, who is the best Master? It meant there was a wider relational context to these things. And so over time, it became less of just me spouting stuff up at them and more of a genuine conversation. And there were actually people I began to connect with, sometimes other Christians, sometimes people who were thoughtful. I came to have a grudging respect for the points of view of people who didn't share my beliefs. And so what began in just a kind of charge on in began to look like an actual real life conversation. And I found particularly that when it was connected to Doctor Who and I was able to explore the themes in and around the show, then that got past people's defences, when I was able to talk about some of the ways in which particular stories reminded me of the Bible or reminded me of Jesus, people were a lot more open to that than the stuff that was in the kind of very more combative, is God real or not type threads. As I went to university, I also became involved in a fan group called Timeless that met in a pub. And I was there to talk about Doctor Who, but also by being involved, getting to know people, sharing life. Um, it gave opportunities to share about my faith, to invite friends along to church. Yeah, so here I am on a pilgrimage to the holy site, the TARDIS set in Cardiff, during the Peter Capaldi years. And I'd like to just explore the question of, well, Doctor Who means so much to me, and the values of the Doctor, never cruel nor cowardly, they deeply resonate, and they resonate with me for many of the same reasons that I find Christ beautiful and attractive, sacrificing himself for others, using his wits rather than violence as people come at him. And I believe that in God's common grace, Doctor Who, even though it's very often written with quite a atheistic outlook, there are many positive aspects of it that resonate deeply with my faith. And yet there is a potential sense of competition. Doctor Who fandom is another place beyond the church where I have found belonging and community. And I think that's good and healthy. And it's not like, as Christians, Jesus came to make us, to restore our humanity, to make us fully human. It's not that all of life needs to come under the umbrella of church, even though all of life should come under the lordship of Christ. But there is the danger of this becoming someone's primary source of identity and meaning. And I think there are different fandoms, and there are people who it's really their thing. This is their community. This is where they get their values, is from Doctor Who or from Star Wars or from Harry Potter or whatever. And on the one hand, well, community is good, but any good thing can become an idol if it becomes too elevated in our lives. And I can see how maybe if I had a crisis of faith, the relationships and community I have through fandom could have been at times, as I struggled with different questions, an escape pod in terms of giving me somewhere else to turn to. And there's a sense in which fandom, you can sort of see some of the commonalities. It's not always good. Sometimes fans can have their own holy wars between different factions, just as Catholic and Protestant. You've got Star Trek and Star Wars or whatever. And there's a sense in which you can kind of see fandom as a sort of watered down, tamed version of something of the religious impulse, in the same way that sport is a kind of watered down version of warfare. It's a more contained, socially acceptable outlet for some of the same passions and energies. And you could see science fiction, see fandom as a way of turning myth into a safe consumer object, a safe consumer experience. But the community around it can still be powerful, valuable, and human. And yeah, I just want to be honest about having been through seasons of what's now commonly termed as deconstructing one's faith. There've been times where I've really wrestled with whether Christianity is true, and that's left me in some dark places. I remember thinking in one of my darker moments as a teenager that if Christianity wasn't true, and I had real doubts about it, if the cosmos was one of blind, pitiless indifference, I didn't want to go on living. And I struggled with my relationship with church and the belonging there, feeling that it was conditional on believing the same things, that I would lose all of that if I started questioning the beliefs that I wasn't sure that I could hold to anymore. And I'm sure have been shown much more grace than that with my questions, but that was something that I felt. And I actually think that having another source of community and belonging actually was helpful in taking some of the pressure off. It took some of the intensity out in that it let me think more clearly about my faith, and in the end, come to a deeper understanding of my faith, of making it my own, by not feeling that it was like so all or nothing in terms of meaning, in terms of community. Um, yeah, so I think it's a complicated relationship, and it might seem strange to think of fandom as having shaped me as much as shaped my faith as much as my faith has shaped that. But I think it has been a two-way street. Let me just see if I can show. Um,
That's your one. And he was sure. Here's the all sorts of things. Go through the press. In a whole way. What we call it always say, and we'll only care. I'll tell you what it will be. But it's only what you want. Truth of our lives aside.
Hence Doctor Who. Every day gets set and I'll need to see one.
and that sense of, do you want to come with me? Um, that has bled into how I understand discipleship. The call to follow Jesus is a call to adventure, and my imagination about God, about following Jesus, has been refreshed and enriched by these stories, and that's yeah, in the same way that Aslan, as a fictional thing, has enriched many of our understandings of God and Jesus. I found the same thing in Doctor Who, and I think that's common grace. God's beauty and God's truth shines out in all sorts of unexpected places, above and beyond the intentions of the creators. So yeah. So opening up conversations. So I think there's an opportunity here. The first thing is I would say, first of all, just be in the community. If you have a passion for something, then you're naturally drawn to connect with other people who share your love for something. And if you love science fiction, then take that opportunity. That gives you a bond, a connection, something to talk about. And you don't need to go in like I did, trying to convert everyone. Just be human, just be present. There's a wonderful ministry in Christian presence. Just get to know people, listen well, ask questions. But I think it is right that as Christians that we listen attentively and we are open to the Spirit's prompting, open to making gospel connections. If we love our neighbours, we will want to share our greater love, our love for Jesus, with people. And it was encouraging. There was one guy from the Doctor Who forum who did come to faith, and he messaged me to say that contributions from myself and other Christians on the forum had helped him on his journey to Christ, and that was amazing. And yeah, so in person too, I had someone who came from the Doctor Who fan group, who came to church, who engaged seriously. I don't know where she is spiritually now, but there was that bridge. If you're real and human and present for people, then you have that opportunity to connect, to share the hope that we have. More recently, I've been doing more in the way of well, I've been doing this for a while, but I've been writing articles, speaking on the radio, using pop culture as a bridge in places such as Premier Radio about Doctor Who. I had an article in Critic magazine online about Philip Pullman, his Dark Materials and Narnia recently. and writing stuff to spark conversation, and then sharing it in some of the groups, online groups that I'm on, and sort of taking the discussion further with other people. Let's just play a little bit of a clip from. If you like the Doctor as a hero, isn't it worth investigating if there really is a Lord of Time who stepped into time and space, who became a human being so that we can be his companions, be changed by following him to make a difference in the universe? Isn't it worth seeing if there's a real evidence and reason for living that, a basis for living in a way that perhaps resonates with Doctor Who? But with Jesus, you've got a real Time Lord, a real Messiah, someone who we can, who gives us a meaning big enough to base our lives on. As much as we can be inspired by a story has to be true for us to build our lives on it. And I think that's what Christianity offers that Doctor Who can't. But I'd also like to encourage Christians to create, to write science fiction stories. I've written a couple of Doctor Who short stories. The first one, The Shopping Trolleys of Doom, was about artificially intelligent shopping trolleys rising up against their human masters, or are they? There is a bit of a twist on the sort of whole evil robots trope. And then the second one, Blessed are the Peacemakers, engaged more directly with questions of faith. I had Tom Baker's Doctor land in Egypt during the Fifth Crusades, where he met Francis of Assisi, who, as a matter of historical fact, went to the Crusades to try and stop them peacefully, marching into the middle of the battlefield to try and preach to the Muslims, because obviously if they're converted, then they wouldn't need to fight, which struck me as at least somewhat doctorish in terms of that foolish, foolhardy kind of doing that. And they teamed up to fight off mind-controlling alien mission scarab beetles, as you do, so that I could approach some of the sort of questions of religious tolerance slightly more metaphorically. But yeah, opportunities to tell stories that engage questions. And I would love to see more Christians writing in the science fiction genre and being ambitious in terms of exploring big ideas and themes, and exploring this modern hunger for meaning, for a mythos big enough, for a new mythos. And perhaps it isn't a new mythos that's needed, but a fresh vision of the myth that we have, the true myth that we have in the gospel. It can also be used to critique idols, such as technocracy and transhumanism, like C.S. Lewis did in That Hideous Strength. There's room for Christian dystopias, Christian views of dystopia. But we can also cast positive visions for a future suffused with hope in a culture that has very little basis for hope. We can offer new myths and ways of seeing the world as meaning-drenched, re-enchanting in the way that Galahad and the Grail by Malcolm Guite seeks to do. We can point people, whether directly or indirectly, to something of the true myth of Jesus Christ crucified, dead, and risen. And we need stories that translate the Christian true myth into mythologies for the 21st century and beyond, to help engage these massive challenges of climate emergency, AI, political fragmentation, space exploration, drone warfare, the internet, transhumanism, and so much more. To do that with grace and truth and a better vision for the future and for being human. You might have seen me wearing a T-shirt with this on earlier at Hutchmeet. And this is a graphic for Damien Walter's science fiction channel. And he pairs together logos, mythos, reason, emotion, reality, fantasy, science fiction. They're these two halves that science fiction thrusts together. And science fiction has a desire both for logos, for something that is rationally true, that is reasonable, and for mythos, something big enough to give us meaning. We long for stories where reason and imagination are reconciled, where truth, goodness, and meaning unite. And as you probably are aware, Tolkien famously helped C.S. Lewis to realise that the gospel is where myth became history, where the stories of a dying, rising God, they pointed to a reality that actually happened in history as objective fact. So the gospel fulfills both halves, the desire for something rational and for something meaning-giving. So let's talk about science fiction. Let's be in community with others who love it, have conversations around it, create excellent stories for the blessing of our neighbours and for the glory of God. Thank you for listening. And please do sign up for my Substack if you like this. More on the bigger on the inside theme, unpacking themes, not just in science fiction, but often particularly science fiction, fantasy, and faith in culture. Find me there with the address or QR code. So I'd love to, and again, I don't want to just be broadcasting. I want to be generating conversation and community around this stuff. So if this is stuff that you are into, please do keep chatting with me both now and beyond Touchmeet.